Hi everyone, my name is Malin. I'm a first year international relations student at King's College London, and I'm currently finishing up my internship with BizGees. I would also like to share with you the process as well as what I have been working on. So, when I first came across the internship, I was immediately drawn to the organization's mission, which through their publication platform, Arts for Refugees, which you can access through Substack, has managed to shed light on numerous important issues specifically aimed at um, their target audience, the Gen Zs. And this approach is truly unique, as mainstream media can sometimes be quite inaccessible to the younger generation, who tend to consume certain writing styles better than others. And the way we present information in Arts for Refugees, it really ensures that the groups we target will be reached. So, in this case, the younger generation, the Gen Zs. And that's why I was also really excited to learn that I would have the opportunity to participate in journalism courses provided by the Thompson Foundation. In the two journalism courses I took part in, the first one focused on how to report or how to, I guess, conduct journalism in general in conflict zones. And what I learned from that is that what journalists have to go through is whenever they're in such situations, they have to ensure that they're just a third party there. They're not trying to intervene in the issue. They have to describe what is happening at the conflict zone, what is happening on site, but not intervene or try to judge the situation. It is really important that journalists thoroughly describe what they see without, I guess, having their own assumptions and their own biases intervene in that process. And that's something that really changed my perspective on reporting and media. And then my second course focused on misinformation and disinformation, and there were two techniques that really stood out to me. The first one had to do with pre-bunking, and the second one was debunking. And basically, these two techniques are basically aimed at how to, I guess, erase or reduce misinformation and disinformation. Pre-bunking has to do with the fact that we have the power to, I guess, prove this false information and warn the audience of this false information before it even comes out. Whereas debunking is the false information is already out, but nonetheless, we can use the correct facts to prove that it's incorrect. That's essentially the two techniques that I learned from the course, and that was very because I heard about debunking before, but pre-bunking was definitely a new concept, and that also was very insightful, very eye-opening. And so our internship consists of three main products. The first one being the journal article that I wrote earlier, which I chose to talk about the Solomon Islands and its post-conflict challenges. And then the second one is an infographic that simplifies this information. And lastly, the podcast that I'm recording at the moment. So without further ado, I'd like to take you all through my article, which I wrote, as I mentioned earlier, on the post-conflict challenges that the Solomon Islands is experiencing. So the Solomon Islands is a Pacific island nation. And I'll first start by sharing what drew me to this topic. The Solomon Islands civil unrest between 1998 and 2003 left deep scars, and while it might not be in the headlines anymore, its impact on younger generations is still actually a major concern. When I first learned about the conflict, it was actually through my high school global politics teacher who had been involved in a peacekeeping mission to the Solomon Islands led by Australia, known for short as Ramsey. I was shocked by how little recent media coverage there was on the aftermath. And given that I come from a family affected by the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia myself, I would say I'm the second generation, I felt a personal connection to the idea of reporting and shedding light on post-conflict recovery. This issue is important because it's not just about reaching peace agreements, it's about rebuilding communities, institutions, and futures. I think the importance of this topic today lies in how many nations, including the Solomon Islands, are still struggling with post-conflict recovery. How do you heal after violence, and how do you build systems that work for everyone, especially the younger generation who has grown up in the shadows of war? In my article, I explored three key areas. The first one has to do with institutional fragility and the impact of Ramsey. During the conflict, the Solomon Islands government essentially collapsed from 1998 to 2003 in these 5 years, leaving behind weak institutions and a lack of public trust. The arrival of the Regional Assistance Mission to the Solomon Islands, or RAMSI for short, as I mentioned earlier, played a vital role in restoring order, rebuilding the country's security infrastructure, and re-establishing governance. But while Ramsey brought about a lot of developmental projects and assisted the country in essentially standing back on its own feet, um, its withdrawal in 2017 brought about a lot of widespread concerns on whether the Solomon Islands could sustain this newfound stability without external support. So, for an example, Australia. One of the key challenges the country still faces is this difficulty that rural islanders have in accessing state institutions and services. With many government services concentrated in the capital of Honiara, rural areas continue to be isolated, leaving citizens feeling marginalized and not supported enough. They feel inadequately supported. And this lack of access to essential services further exacerbates the gap between the urban and rural communities, undermining the progress that the peacekeeping mission brought about and that the people of the Solomon Islands brought about. I think that it's really important as one of the main issues to address institutional fragility, as a lot of post conflict nations tend to deal with this. When the government has to rebuild itself from the ground, yeah, it is common that there is issues with how state services are being distributed and whatnot. But I think that it's important that this is brought back into discussion in order to ensure that for the younger generation of the Solomon Islanders, this would continue to be less of an issue. The second key area I explored is the post-conflict reconciliation process between the different ethnic groups in the Solomon Islands. Because the Solomon Islands is extremely diverse, with lots of ethnic groups, lots of language being spoken on just this one island nation. There are a lot of islands that consist in this island nation. And when the conflict first ended, the Solomon Islands Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC for short, was modeled after South Africa's post-apartheid initiative, aimed at addressing ethnic tensions and promoting national unity. And while the TRC provided an official platform for acknowledging human rights violations, it also struggled with slow bureaucratic processes and deep emotional challenges that hindered true reconciliation. I also do think that from the way, from my research, I also do think that the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, even though they try their best in assisting these ethnic groups in building connections with one another again, it's nonetheless based on a somewhat Western top-down approach. So I do not think that it gets down to the nitty-gritty process of actually building meaningful and genuine connections between these ethnic groups so they can coexist. And so this is also an important issue that needs to be addressed. And the lack of timely justice and the absence of substantial community-driven efforts left many victims feeling unheard. And the reconciliation process was further also complicated by political and social divisions that remain entrenched in the country's fragmented society. It's important, of course, to go through this truth and reconciliation process, but it's also really, really crucial that we acknowledge that it has its own limitations. And so, to a certain extent, addressing the issue on the community level first and then going from a bottom-up approach is also might be an alternative path that might be more suitable for countries that are diverse and community focused, like the Solomon Islands. The third issue I talk about has to do with the socio-economic challenges that the younger generation is facing, so the post-memory generation. The younger generation in the Solomon Islands, born out of the conflict, carries the heavy responsibility of piecing together their nation's fractured history while navigating a future that remains uncertain. These youth often face a unique challenge. They are disconnected from their past, but still they must deal with its lingering impacts, such as socioeconomic instability and fractured national identity. Education and employment opportunities are scarce, and the lack of sufficient programs to integrate youth into professional fields limits their potential, leaving many to struggle to secure a stable future. Because a lot of the people in the job market in the Solomon Islands are actually expats. Of course, a lot of the Solomon Islanders are also in the job market, but I'm talking about the more professional, more technical roles. They're granted to expats because they already have the appropriate training and the experiences to execute these roles more efficiently. But the reason why the younger generation can't access this or cannot attain these technical skills is because they're not appropriate institutions. There are not appropriate resources granted to them so they can explore this. So that is also a key issue area at the Solomon Islands at the moment. Their voices and contributions are crucial to the country's recovery, but without a comprehensive focus on their needs, the cycle of marginalization and instability is likely to persist at this very moment. So, why is this topic crucial? As we look at global conflicts and their legacies, we see that post conflict recovery is never linear. It's about addressing not just the political and economic issues, but also the emotional and social scars that war leaves behind. I'll leave you with this. If we want to build a sustainable future for countries like the Solomon Islands, we need to think beyond peace agreements. We need to focus on the real work of reconciliation, rebuilding trust in institutions, and providing opportunities for the next generation to thrive. Official ceasefire does not necessarily mean the conflict is over. Post conflict recovery needs to be acknowledged, needs to be seen through. So, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Solomon Islands journey towards recovery. Have a nice day.